do you think that the historical role of central banks would be affected by the present crisis? And how, if so, banking is expected to be changed as a consequence of the crisis? And connected with this is still baggy hot, and the fundamentals of lender of last resort valid as a guide to central banks. What do you think?
Well, I think it's clear that the role has already changed, and changed dramatically, and changed permanently. The lender of last resort is basically going to be an antiquarian term. What's going to become more relevant will be a term like investor of last resort, or possibly counterparty of last resort. Let me explain. In response to the crisis, the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve System of the United States, which as an American I would say is not just the central bank of the United States, but in many respects the central bank of the global financial system, and has under Greenspan taken responsibilities for stability in the global financial system at various times. The balance sheet in response to the subprime crisis in the United States of the Federal Reserve System alone has tripled. And it's stayed tripled. Now they're trying to sell off some of their assets that they've had, but it's only when the market permits, and the market basically doesn't permit that yet. The Bank of England, kind of our senior role model for being a central bank and a lender of last resort, doubled their balance sheet in response to the Northern Rock collapse and the nationalization of several of the leading joint stock banks in England. The European Central Bank, a different kind of central bank, has increased its balance sheet 50%. And you can see from the relative recoveries of the US economy, the British economy, and the European economies, that that wasn't sufficient. So one of the interesting things is the imitation of the central banks to each other's responses. And I have to say the European Central Bank, I think, was the first one to really respond in a dramatic way, because actually the subprime crisis starts in Germany back in the beginning of 2007. Before the Bear Stearns crisis in June of 2007. So they started it, they showed the Americans how to do things. And very quickly, Ben Bernanke imitated what the European Central Bank was doing, mainly by not saying you have to come to a discount window to borrow, but instead, I'm just going to give you a facility and we'll auction off the new supply of dollars for a long-term or medium-term financing facility. So that's the situation, and what that meant was for all three of these central banks, their portfolios now have a strange mix of assets. They are, in fact, the investors of last resort for basically isolating the toxic assets that were created during the credit boom. We don't know when this is all going to be resolved because we haven't seen the actual refinancing that's going to be necessary to pull us through. But it's clear that we're set up for another kind of crisis like this. The response has been most successful, I think, in the U.S. That meant tripling the balance sheet. That means being the investor of last resort. That's far above and beyond being a lender of last resort.
And connected with this, with your argument, I have a second question.
No, this is the truth. This isn't just an argument. I just laid out the facts.
Right. It's from a viewpoint of an American economist and economic historians. How do you see the situation of the current situation of the European Monetary Union? Do you think the area will survive the present crisis? And of course, do you think the euro will be able to resist the crisis?
Well, as an American who makes frequent trips to Europe, I certainly hope the euro survives, because I remember once having a trip to Sweden, going through London, and ended up having two different currencies having to exchange, and I still have Swedish coins at home. And fortunately, the British have stayed on the pound, so those are still good. The worst thing is going through Denmark to in the airport there in Copenhagen. And so, this is tremendous convenience for the rest of the world, and I'm sure for all the Europeans as well, to have this common currency. I hope it survives. Okay. I think the political commitment, especially by the Germans and the French, is solid. So there will continue to be a euro. What's going to change possibly is the membership of the euro, the terms of the membership. Mm-hmm. I can't believe Greece has got to go through some form of a default, and whether it means that the means of payment internally remains the euro or a substitute quasi-euro, Greek euro, for the period of restructuring is unclear at this time. What is going to change, related to my answer to the first question, is the way the European Central Bank performs in basically being the monopolist issuer of euros. They've been committed to the idea that their role is just to provide a stable means of payment for the Eurozone as a whole. They were not equipped to be a lender of last resort. Trichet was brilliant, I thought, in effectively becoming a lender of last resort, and then, under pressure, finally became reluctantly an investor of last resort. Mm-hmm. There's no going back on that. So the European Central Bank could do that. But to be an investor of last resort means they can no longer be accepting as a counterparty sovereign bonds from the member states of the Eurozone at the same level. They can't say, the Greek government bonds, the Spanish government bonds, Irish government bonds are all just as good as the German government bonds. They're going to have to pay attention to the market signals in the global financial market and say, okay, yes, that is good collateral, but at a haircut that varies for the individual countries.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Larry.
Okay.